Whether you can't get out of bed in the morning, your energy crashes throughout the day, or you're a biohacker looking to optimize your energy, productivity, and focus, this podcast is for you. I am Dr. Evan Hirsch, and I will be your host on your journey to resolving fatigue and optimizing your energy. And we'll be interviewing some of the top leaders in the world on fatigue resolution. Welcome. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Fix Your Fatigue podcast. I'm so happy that you're here with me today. We help leaders, executives, and everyday people take their energy to the next level so that they can achieve more success in every aspect of their lives. So today I'm really excited because we're going to be talking about the mental aspect of fatigue as well as mental performance with my friend Seth Pepper. So let me tell you a little bit about Seth. So having distinguished himself in the athletic field and built himself into one of the fastest swimmers in the world, #4 world ranking, Seth understands it is precisely this shared experience that provides the crucial link to gaining the trust and respect of his clients. Seth serves as performance and mental coach to elite professional performers from the athletic, business, and arts industry from around the globe. Performance is performance, and tailors his approach to each of his clients' individual needs. Seth has the success and the scars to speak from personal experience and to apply these hard-won lessons not only toward his clients' journeys, but also to achieving continued success in his own role as coach. Seth is proud to share what he's learned with others, dedicated to becoming not just the best performers they can be, but the very best version of themselves in the process. I love that so much. Clients include Olympic and world champions, professional athletes, university coaches, C-suite and top sales managers, and to Netflix film directors and musicians. Seth, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Evan, for having me. I've been excited about this. This has been, a lot of anticipation for this conversation.
Yeah, me too. So today we're going to be talking about optimizing energy with the Unlimit Your Potential system that I know that you developed. So let's talk about kind of like how you developed this system. Like, tell us kind of about what led you to this point.
Okay. Well, it's personal. When I was young, I fell in love with the Olympics, the Olympic ideal, watching it on TV. And but I came from a family where my dad built classical guitars and my mom was an English teacher. So it wasn't an athletic household. So it's kind of this, strange interest that I had. And so when I was 14 years old, I remember that's kind of the age where you start to awaken to taking control of your destiny, so to speak. And so I set out with this sort of, I like to call it a mental experiment. And I started focusing on the Olympics and I studied them and I decided I got to choose a sport. So you need a sport, a focus. So I eliminated all the sports down to swimming because I come from a small little town in Oregon originally. And so just watched swimming. And then from there was a girl that just won the gold medal. And the announcer asked the question that was in my head, which is, what's next? So he asked it in his form, which was, if someone else there wants to do what you just did, what would you suggest? And I remember saying, whatever she says, that's it. That's what I'm going to do. So she said, I came through a YMCA program. So I went in, back then, got the yellow pages and found the YMCA, went down there. Walked up to the head coach, said, my name is Seth Pepper. I want to go to the Olympics. Can you help me? He asked me if I knew how to swim. I said, no, I don't. He started laughing. And he said, sure, you're going to be starting with the 8-year-olds. So I started very humble beginnings, but it didn't really, to me, I was just focused on this experiment. Let's see where it goes. I was fully motivated. Same time, my dad was always interested in self-development. So I grew up on Dale Carnegie and all the classics, and he had this book on memory. And he said, there's this little section in there about the East Germans. And this is back before sports psychology was even a major in college. So, it really was cutting edge. And so the East Germans, this is about basketball. they had this little, well, I guess it was a study that actually did make a headway. And it had 3 test groups. One group was physical training only. Another group was physical and then mental. So it was a combination of the two. I had no idea what mental training was. And then there was a group that didn't even touch a basketball. All they did was mental training. Okay. Results come back. The group that was the lowest was physical training only. The mixed group was the highest. And then this group over here that didn't even touch a basketball was just slightly below the top group. And immediately I was like, what is that? I need the edge. I need help. And so I just got fascinated with the power of the mind. And from right from the beginning, I started studying about the subconscious mind, all the different things. There wasn't a lot out there. So, you know, you really were trying to find that cutting edge information. And so from there, I became a state champion within 4 years. And then I went to the university, and my sophomore year, I was going head to head with the Olympic gold medalist, and I beat him the entire race until the final stroke. So within 6 years, I went from this 14-year-old dreamer to going against the best in the world. And eventually I became a 2-time national champion. And along the way, my brother also took an interest, and he's 2.5 years younger than me. And so when he started, he was 17. And so that was my first experience of coaching someone else, right? So I ended up going to the University of Arizona, and he's still in Oregon. So I started doing what I do now, which is remote coaching. And I took him through what I put myself through. And eventually he went to the university, and eventually his senior year, we put him in the position to be able to win the national title. And so the two of us won the national, we're the only brothers to have won the same national title in the same event in the history of swimming. So yeah, it's been a very interesting journey. And then to turn around and start to coach others and get results like that has been really, really exciting. So I think it's an interesting engagement with people to be able to speak of something that seems maybe really subtle. You know, when you're talking about the mind, it's something that you read in a book, maybe you see some videos online, and it sounds great. But to actually have that real life tangible story, to be able to say, this really works. This really, you know, it will give you the results, but you have to stick with it. You got to put in the time, just like you do physical training, you have to do the mental training. So yeah, that's
brilliant. Yeah, not too shabby at all. So when you say you got to put in the time, what are we talking about? How much time do you feel like is necessary for somebody to, I mean, it's obviously it's a constant evolution, I would imagine, but what sort of time do people need to dedicate to their mental, or we're going to call it mindset? What would you call it?
Well, I would say overall, it's a little bit of both. You know, there's the training mindset, there's the competitive or the competition mindset, you know, and then the mental training that you do every day. There's so many different components to it. What I'm trying to do initially, you know, I think I said this to you off air, which is when someone asks me what's the simplest, you know, explanation of what you do, I'll say I help people get out of their own way, right? So a lot of times we have limiting beliefs and we don't even realize we do, right? And so I call this the crabs in the bucket, right? You know, which is this sort of metaphor that if you put a bucket of crabs out, as soon as one crab starts to get out of the bucket, the rest of the crabs pull it back down. So you don't need a top, you know, to keep all the crabs in the bucket. So if you're that crab that wants to get out, you know, we're all surrounded by limiting mindsets. And so my entire life, I was laughed at, crazy, you know, what are you thinking? You're a dreamer. And so I've had that experience to be able to, you know, fixate on something and just believe in it before it happens. And that takes a lot of tenacious, I call it tenacious optimism, right? So it's not just being positive. Optimism is accepting the way things are and expecting something that's going to work in your favor eventually with some appreciation and training. So yeah, as far as the time that I think it's more of the intensity, the intent, the intensity. And so it may not be the same amount of time that you would physically go out and train. So maybe you're trained, like when I was training 6 hours a day physically. So you're not necessarily going to put 6 hours in mental training, but the intensity has the same. So there is a balance between the two.
Mm-hmm. And are there practices that you recommend that like people do on a regular basis?
Definitely, definitely. I try to get people interested in goals. We hear the word goals a lot, especially around New Year's, New Year's resolutions, and so I try to get people, it's my way of getting to know someone is to work through their goals. And it's very interesting because a lot of times they will only talk about the most immediate goals, and then they won't talk about the lifelong goals, okay? And where do you really want to go? If you couldn't lose, what would that look like, right? And that's everybody that I've worked with wants to be trained the same way, So I sound like I'm maybe an athletic coach, but I'm training business executives, I'm training film directors, fashion designers, professional ballerinas, the same way, all the way across the board. And it's this idea of if you couldn't lose, if you could get your dream, what would that look like? And at first, people will be really tentative. Sometimes, people are completely open to it, but a lot of times it's like, okay, it's going to be okay. This is a safe space. And then once they start to unfold that, then you're trying to me, I'm just trying to connect the dots. I really want them to be able to speak it into existence, which is to be able to talk with confidence now, even though it's in the future, right? And so I will just get into belief. Belief is huge, and getting clarity around what what it is that they really want to have happen. And then once we get into that conversation, I just see results happening where all of a sudden they're doing the problem solving. We really try to spend a lot of time on the subconscious mind. It's a quiet, I use the metaphor of the iceberg. So the tip of the iceberg is the conscious mind, something you can see, it's obvious, it's there, you can talk about it. The subconscious mind is this mass, this continent that's below the water. That's the subconscious mind. That's how powerful it is. But it sits there quietly, right? So it's a matter of tapping into that power and trusting that power. And then when people start to experience real results, then it gets very interesting.
Yeah, so how long does it take to get real results, do you find? I mean, if somebody were just to start doing the belief exercise where they're believing it before it happens, right? How long do you feel like that would take somebody?
Well, to be completely transparent, I have had results in one conversation over and over and over. There was one conversation I had in particular. A gentleman contacted me. It was on one of those social media networks, so their username was not their real name. I had no idea who they were. And he said, does this really work? Can we talk? I have this practice. It's a Monday. And he's like, I got this important practice on Thursday. I said, sure. So we get on the phone, probably 45-minute conversation. And it turns out he's a basketball player. And so when I'm listening to someone, especially for the first time, but always really, I'm listening for patterns. I'm listening for expansion and contraction and blockages, right? So maybe a doctor would talk the same way about the body. That's what I'm doing with the mind is, so what I could sense from him was that he was very skilled at he trained a long time. He was capable. He was just as capable as anyone in the entire nation. He is an incredible talent, but he kept self-sabotaging. And so he had a really tough upbringing. There wasn't any stability in his household at all. He was actually born in jail. His mom was serving time.
Oh.
And so for me, I could just see if he could just get out of his own way, what would happen? What would happen then? And so I gave him a tool that I thought would work for him, especially in the time that we had, 4 days, just so that he could just show up and perform. And it wouldn't be, him, it would be this ability, right? Just allow it to just come through you without any judgment, without any sort of filter, without any identity. And he contacted me on Thursday after the practice, and it turned out that it was a tryout, and he said, I made it. I said, what do you mean? I really thought it was a practice. And he said, no, it was for the NBA. It was a tryout for the #1 team at the time in the NBA. And so he had been in the G League, the Gatorade League, that's the minor league of the NBA. And he was the same person physically on Monday as he was on Thursday. But on Thursday, it was just a natural ability. It was the ability to just be. And that changed everything. I met with a PGA champion, LPGA champion, excuse me, and one conversation, and she was going into the final round. So they usually have, in these big tournaments, they have 4 rounds, which means 4 days of competition. So this is the very end of the competition. And so we had one conversation. I gave her 3 simple tips, right? And she would text me as she was teeing off, so starting out the competition. And before we had met, she was saying, these girls out there, they're going 9 under. 9 under. Can you imagine like how good that is, right? I couldn't, because I was just listening and experiencing it with a beginner's mind. I think that's helpful, just to have a beginner's mind without any sort of judgment. Because if I would have thought 9 under was just a crazy dream, then it wouldn't have done us any good. So I was trying to look at this as, well, if they can do it, you can do it. And so like I said, I gave her 3 simple steps. These are really simple things. So I'm a lot of times reminding people, in the heat of the battle is what I call it, when the pressure is on. A lot of times things just, all the concepts and all the moving parts kind of go out the window, right? So when you're out there under pressure, you want some very, very simple things. So with her, I got her to meditate 3 minutes, which was a lot for her. And then I got her to focus on breathing. And then I got her to not look at the leaderboard, so not look at the score, so that we didn't get into comparisons. I like to go through, kind of the classic, I don't know if you're familiar with the monkey mind, the critical thoughts. And so I asked her permission. I said, if you don't know what the rest of your competition is doing, is that okay? Have you ever done that? Oh yeah, I play great that way. Okay, well, we're going to do that, because it doesn't matter what anyone else is doing. You want to focus on yourself, be the best version of yourself. So those 3 simple things, and guess what she did? She went 9 under. She went 9 under. They said that round was her career best ever, right? That was one conversation, and she won a lot of money. So yeah, one conversation. I mean, of course, you want these things to last. You want them to, I always feel like, when they say there's beginner's luck, I believe in that in a way, where it's like a doorway's open, but then you have to go back and earn how to like unlock that door. So I think there's usually this initial kind of beginner's luck, and then we got to put in the real work.
And it seems like with beginner's luck, it's that you don't have any negative thoughts or any limiting beliefs, because you just don't know anything. I remember the first time that I went and played craps, I was at my brother-in-law's wedding or bachelor party or something like that. And I grew up in New Jersey, so this was Atlantic City. And I totally ran the table. I had no clue what I'm doing. I'm just throwing it. I don't know anything, right? Winning people tons of money, right? But I've never been able to repeat that. Exactly. Because I studied it, and I was like, oh, maybe I want to do this, maybe I want to do this, right? Is that part of it? Is that part of getting out of your own way?
Yes, it is. It is 100%. It's fascinating to become both the observer and the participant. That's the ultimate. The flow state is what we're really trying to get to. And so when I'm working with people, I'm working with all these different people from you know, whether it's the sports world or the business or the arts. And we're all kind of in this together. So I encourage people to come back and share what's going on with them. And then also, if they find things out there that's really motivating and inspirational, you know, one of those things we kind of jokingly call them breadcrumbs. So the subconscious mind may not exactly speak in language, but you know, within your belief structure, there are things that sort of pop up, you know, little breadcrumbs, if you will, saying, hey, you know, you're headed in the right direction, even if it's just synchronicity, you know. And so I encourage that sort of interaction with people because it helps support this sort of belief growing. And yeah, I mean, I think it's fascinating to look across the board and look at what all the greats are doing. And so with all of the greats, the GOATs, if you will, that's kind of the catchphrase these days, there really is something to having the ability to go back to that beginner's mind. And there's something about being able to both simultaneously be the participant, but also the observer, so that you're allowing that subconscious mind to come up and that genius from within to present itself. I mean, it's just, for me, it's fascinating just in what I do, because I feel like there's an organic experience between me and someone else, someone that I'm coaching or a group that I'm working with, where I know what we're going to go over, right? And I have other options in case we shift gears, but I really don't know exactly how it's going to unfold. Mm-hmm. So I think of it as like surfing one of the big waves. You know, I used a lot of metaphors, and so a metaphor that I like is surfing. And so with the flow state, for me, there's three main components. I like to simplify things down to three, which is that you have to be able to have a bit of control. So you have to have the competency to be able to perform the task, right? And so these big wave surfers, let's use that as an example. They've been surfing for a very long time. So everything comes together. They can handle themselves on a big wave, right? Now, the next thing is, then the other leg to the tripod is unpredictability or novelty. So you don't know what's going to happen next, right? So a lot of times that's built into performance. For a wave, every wave in nature is unique. It's its own, you know, wave. And then the third element, which is what we spend most of our time on, is pressure, because you need to have pressure. You need to have that sort of tension that grabs your attention. So when they're surfing a big wave, if they mess up, they could hurt themselves or even die, you know, so that's very, very pressure filled. So they literally drop into these waves and they drop into the flow state. So that's what I feel like we're trying to do in performance across the board, but also in the coaching experience, is we're going to drop into this conversation and we'll find out, you know, as we're in the moment, all this wonderful thing. Like there's you know, I've talked about this subject, but I've never talked in this way, and you're drawing it out of me as well, you know, so we're having this interaction between the two of us. Mm-hmm. And I watch that unfold in the people that I work with in their performance, where they come back and they say, I consciously wouldn't have known how to do that, but because I was able to let go, I was amazed at how capable I was at being able to handle that situation. And I became the observer at the same time, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. And so that's when they're able to be the observer and the participant.
Yes.
And so then it seems like it sounds kind of a little bit like meditation and noticing. I mean, you mentioned meditation. How much of a role do you feel like meditating plays in this? Can people get into the flow state if they're not meditating?
Well, I would say that meditation is key. So you hear mindfulness is a word that's becoming more and more common. To me, when I look at a picture, like let's say of Tiger Woods, right? When he's playing out on the course, or some of the great athletes that have come through in modern times. Tom Brady is someone that won 7 Super Bowls. When I watch their steadiness And it gets labeled by most as mental strength, right? But to me, I call it mental calmness and quietness. There's a calmness that's going on. And so like Tom Brady, he practices transcendental meditation daily. So TM, that's an intense 15, I'm trained in it, 15 to 20 minutes of meditation. He does that every day. Kobe Bryant, you know, actually traveled overseas to learn from the masters. And he had his simple version that I think he was just trying to promote so that people would get more involved in mindful practice, which is, he called it quiet, you know, having some quiet time. So his was 5 minutes a day. So all of these different athletes, so LeBron James, he works with the app Calm. You know, I think he's a main investor as well. So he's working with an app, but they're all working on mindfulness, and they're all working in their own, you know, particular, like whatever works for them, you know. And so I think it's key that you quiet your mind. When you quiet your mind, like Kobe would say, if I miss meditation, I feel like I'm chasing the day. When I get 5 minutes of quiet time in meditation, I'm in the groove of the day. Two different experiences, right? And so it's just that simple. And I love to be able to, you know, I'm working with 8-year-old world champions, if you can believe it. and I love when they start doing meditation at the age of 8. I would have loved to have been able to, you know, been aware of quieting my mind, you know, not getting involved in the chatter, not getting involved in the comparisons and the stories. Because now with phones, computers in our pocket, it's a tool that is used a lot of times and it creates a distraction, you know, a lot of noise in our life. And so I will actually hold the phone up and I'll say, most of the things that will happen on this will be someone else's story. We're concerned about your story, right? Take out a blank piece of paper, put the phone down. Let's work on our story, you know, rather than getting distracted. So yeah, I could go off in that direction if you wanted to talk about that more, but yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a really important one because, you know, one of the things I heard somebody speak at one point, they said, you know, when you wake up in the morning and you start checking your phone and you look at your email, you're looking at what somebody else wants of you. And then you look at Facebook and immediately you're into comparison. Can you talk a little bit more about stuff like that?
Yes, I think it's very interesting how we have the influence. You know, to me, I've become more and more clear of this because when I'm working with someone, I'm dealing with performance, obviously. And when I'm especially working with an athlete, especially a high profile athlete, they need an answer. They need something, a tool. They need, if you will, a weapon for the war, you know, the battle. And they come back with immediate results. So immediately I'm accountable, they're accountable, this worked, this didn't work, right? And so I love to be able to take that and translate that over to others. And so what I have found is that there are more and more, there are athletes, but I want to say this across the board in other areas of life. What's happening, I think, through social media is that we are branding ourselves without even being aware of branding, right? So when you post something about what you're working on or what you're experiencing, it's like a company that would be branding a story, you know, sharing a story about their brand. Now that may seem like, okay, well, this is communication, I'm just sharing my life, sure. But I'm concerned about the performance part of it. Okay, so when I see people that are out there on the playing field, let's say, of life, and they're playing scared, which is what I'm seeing more and more, they really feel like their identity is wrapped up in the score, right? And they don't see the difference. And so a lot of times I'll be the first person to step in and go, look, that sport is what you choose to do, right? It is not who you are. Who you are as a human being, right? A human being can be flawed, is flawed. You need to be able to be a human being first and make the choice to do whatever that activity is. And when you make that distinction and you separate the two, then guess what? when you know yourself outside, so you create some mental symmetry outside of your performance, then you can come into the performance with even more reckless abandon, right? Where you come in as though it's life or death because you know that it's not life or death. But when you really feel like it's life or death, then you're in fight, flight, freeze. And that is a short supply of energy that's meant to outrun a saber-toothed tiger, right? It is not meant to go out and play an entire soccer game, you know, or ice hockey game, or, you know, you name it. I mean, these long periods of performance. So the more that we can work through their, you know, the branding, the identity, you know, and separate their performance from who they are as a person, that's the one conversation that I think can just, I've seen that, you know, work with these top, like just recently a top tennis player, and he was struggling with, you know, basically his score had become his identity. And when he wasn't playing well out there, he didn't feel like he was a good human being, you know, and it sounds consciously, that doesn't sound right. Like that just sounds obviously wrong, but we're talking on an emotional level, right? And people get so caught up in, I got to do well, I got to do well. And then they go out and they share it on a social media platform, one way or the other, and they start to feel that way about themselves, and they haven't separated their score from who they are as a person. And when you start to work with them, you can just see the weight just shed off of them, you know. It's very, very powerful.
That is powerful. One of the things that I'm working on actually with my coach is that I have the belief that I can help everybody that I work with. You know,
Yes.
and I've taken on that burden. And so if somebody is not getting better, not getting the results that I want them to get, that they want to get, you know, I'm taking that on. And so that's limiting me in terms of my ability to be at my best. Would you agree?
Yes, there's a lot of wisdom in the airlines when they say, put your mask on first, right? Before you try to help others, you know. I learned in lifeguarding, you know, because a swimmer becomes a lifeguard, and to make money in the summers, you're going to be lifeguard, right? Number one rule is the last thing you do is get in the water to save someone, right? Because as they are, you know, in their state of panic, they will grab onto you and take you under too. So you have to be able to have your own ability and your own identity in your own space to be a whole person, and then come, you know, with everything you have, and know who you are outside of that activity, and bring the mental symmetry. And then you bring, you know, a whole scope of things that if you are just over identifying with, you know, the end results, then again, you're going to be, I call it, because a lot of times when people come to me, we'll go through goals, and then I'll ask them, okay, well, you've achieved that goal, let's say, how's that going to make you feel? And at least 9 times out of 10, if not 10 out of 10, it's all about confidence, right? And so let's work on confidence first. Let's just work on confidence, because confidence is something that you and I can work on. And then the achievement will be the byproduct rather than the focus, right? And so we work through the ability to be able to gain control on the little things, the little actions that we can put into play every day. I have a little saying that I like to use with people called baby steps to a quantum leap. Okay, so baby steps are the tiny little actions that you do have control over every single day, right? And that builds up the momentum, right? And then the momentum naturally turns into confidence, right? But confidence is not what we're focused on. We are focused on the little tiny actions, because we keep doing those little tiny actions every day, and we keep building up this momentum, then it just naturally turns into confidence. And when you get confidence, that's the game changer. That's like the 10x factor. I've watched people literally before my eyes, you know, turn into a different person when they're confident. Because when you're confident, yes, you will be in the space to achieve your goal. Whether you do or you don't, you'll be in the space, you'll be close enough, either way. But there's like this whole other area of I like to say 2/3 of the equation is all the things that will, all the opportunities that will be attracted to you when you're confident. Because everyone loves to be around someone that's confident, right? They give them opportunity. Opportunity comes to you that you know that neither one of us could have imagined, right? And so that's what we try to do for that quantum leap. That quantum leap is confidence.
Nice. So let's go a little bit deeper on that. So like, where does, and you touched on this a little bit, but where does confidence come from?
My experience has been that confidence comes from a combination of being able to focus on the little things, the little tiny things that you can do. What I have found with the great performers is that they're almost obsessed with focusing on the little things that they can control and letting go of everything else. So confidence a lot of times will be this sort of external factor where if I win this competition, then I'll feel a sense of accomplishment and confidence. Well, that's external, because some days, let's say your competition is just having a great competition themselves and you're not going to win, but you did your best effort, you did your best performance. So we try to not get too focused on things that we don't control, which is other people's performance. We focus on our best effort, okay? And if you do the little things right, just the tiny little things, Kobe Bryant has this saying, do the little things right, okay? He was known for having these workouts that were just extremely grueling, but extremely basic. So that's what I'm used to doing, is breaking it down into, that's why I always go back to 3 or something really small, because I know that we're going to really have to grind away at this in order to have it result into action, right? So as much as someone might call me a performance coach or a mental coach, I will always, if they give me the opportunity, I'll always bring, I feel like I'm more of an action coach, because if it doesn't turn into action, then it's not really becoming anything, you know, it's just mental exercise. And I really want you to have results, and I want you to be able to know how those results happen so that you can go and do this again in whatever area. So it might start in sports, but it's a life skill. And so when big things happen for people, I'll always come with, that's building momentum. I'm not going, oh my gosh, this is amazing, bring it back. You know, like the NBA player, for instance. I always remind them, we started this little mantra, which is, it's no big deal because you're the real deal, right? Because I'll make this point with them. If you think the NBA is a big deal, you're only going to be there for a week, right? That has to be your new normal, right? So it's no big deal because you're the real deal. And then we just build upon that and get into the little things that we can control, because when we focus on those little tiny actions, that gives you an immediate sense of control, but then also it keeps building up. And just like a bank account, you know, where you put in, you know, there's the compound interest effect, let's say. So if you were to put $1 in a bank account when you were born, or your parents did, yeah, it doesn't sound like much, $1. At the end of the week, $7 still doesn't sound like much. But when you start to factor in compound interest, and they keep doing that, and then maybe you start doing it, just $1 a day, never changes. They say that about year 14, 15, you're gonna have close to $500,000, right? Because of the compound interest upon interest upon interest. So I look at action steps the same way. If we do the tiny little 1% improvement every day, just 1% every day, it has this compound effect where it starts to blossom into this quantum leap. And I've just seen it over and over and over and over, that it really does work. But you know, it's all about little things. So sometimes it can be a little bit boring, but that's life, right?
That's great advice. So I could just talk to you all day, but I'm going to ask you one more question.
Okay.
So actually maybe 2. But so then what would you offer as, what's one thing somebody can do right now to take their mental performance to the next level?
Yes. Change. If this is what they have to work on, which is what most people do need to adjust on some level. Change your relationship to pressure, okay? So when we feel pressure, we have this, the brain is the computer, the mind is the software, right? And so our brain is really wired for survival, okay? So when we want to perform, and it doesn't matter if you're in academia or if you're athletics, business, all the same. Performance is performance, as I like to say. In the space that you want to be in, where your best performance is going to happen, there needs to be pressure, right? There just needs to be. But your mind is going to say, eject, get out of here, run away. This doesn't feel comfortable, because it doesn't happen in comfort, right? So we need to lean into pressure, have a different relationship with pressure, and know that pressure is something that can serve us, right? And so I like to say to people that we're going to just treat the results like a computer would treat data, right? We're going to take the personalization of losing and failure. We have to get rid of that, because growth happens in failure. So go back to the beginning of my story. When I'm 14 and they put me in the lane with 8-year-olds, and those 8-year-olds are beating me every day. My best friend's little brother used to beat me every day. If I would have said, I can't take this anymore, why am I not swimming with the other 14-year-olds? My career's over. So I started in a state of failure, right? But I didn't see it as failure. I saw it as growth. You see how you change your mindset, and you're just like, and my coach later on, so like you said, a 2-time national champion, went the fastest split ever recorded, ended up being 4th in the world. My coach was, in essence, Michael Phelps's coach, because he had Olympic coach eventually. He stopped me one day and he says, you know what sets you apart? I said, what? I don't know, hard work, determination, all those sort of classic answers. He said, no, I've never met someone that actually gets more excited from a bad performance than an easy win, right? And he was right, because those performances where there's a lot of growth, they're really painful, and sometimes, a lot of times, they're really ugly too. But I knew that there was going to be a lot to mine out of that. So I would encourage people to lean into failure, because failure is going to have your greatest amount of growth, the greatest amount of data points for you to collect. Lean into pressure. Your performance is going to happen in pressure, except that it's going to be uncomfortable, right? I'm friends with George Mumford, who is the mental coach was the mental coach for both Jordan and Kobe. And he has this great little saying that he says to me, Seth, your ass has to be on fire, right? And he's known as being the mindful coach. So when everybody says, oh, well, we need to meditate and everything feels good, he's like, yeah, you got to quiet your mind, but your ass has to be on fire. And that's just life, right? It's just life. So I think there's a real practical part that I come from, that we're going to head into the discomfort, right? And this discomfort's going to teach you something about yourself. And again, it's the man in the mirror, the woman in the mirror. It's you, your relation. Your greatest competitor is always going to be yourself, right? So I know I threw out a lot in there, but I hope that I answered it on some level.
Absolutely. Really brilliant. So people, you can find Seth at sethpepper.com. We will put the links below this in the show notes. And Seth has been gracious enough where if you mention this podcast, you can get 10% off his services with you. Anything else you want to leave us with, Seth? Really appreciate you taking the time today.
I just appreciate what you're doing and what you're putting out there. The part of the story, keep it brief, is that my mom was manic depressed my entire life. Okay, she's no longer here. She had rheumatoid arthritis, and eventually, it really became the beginning of the end. And so I just wanted to mention that the mind-body connection is personal to me. So when I was with her, I was always trying to understand, how do I motivate you? But I was really working on me. And so I would encourage people out there, all the information I've looked at, some of the podcasts that you've had already, your information is vitally important in the world. And I just appreciate you allowing me to have a little bit of your time to share my story and to connect. So I hope it's helped on some level.
Absolutely. Well, I so appreciate that. And the work that you're doing is equally as important for not just the elite performance folks, but also for those who have fatigue and some of these other chronic issues. So thanks so much for joining me today, Seth. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you, Evan. Pleasure's.
I hope you learned something on today's podcast. If you did, please share it with your friends and family and leave us a 5-star review on iTunes. It's really helpful for getting this information out to more fatigued people who desperately need it. Sharing all the experts I know and love and the powerful tips I have on fatigue is one of my absolute favorite things to do. If you'd like more information, please sign up for my newsletter, where I share all important facts and information about fatigue, from the foods and supplements to the programs and products that I use personally and recommend to others so that they can live their best lives. Just go to fixyourfatigue.com/newsletter to sign up, and I will send you this great information. Thanks for being part of my community. Just a reminder, this podcast is for educational purposes only and is not a substitute for professional care by a doctor or other qualified medical professional. It is provided with the understanding that it does not constitute medical or other professional advice or services. If you're looking for help with your fatigue, you can visit my website and work with us at fixyourfatigue.com. And remember, it's important that you have someone in your corner who is a credentialed healthcare professional to help you make changes. This is very important, especially when it comes to your health. Thanks for listening.